start. Just so that you know, some of you do not know me. My name is Ashish Khan. I'm from IIT Kharagpur. I'm part of the organizing team, and I've been able to help with the content of this conference. So the last panel session is very, very interesting. You have been talking about, the theme of this conference is creative disruption, right? And we have been talking about things like, the mantra of IITians is, if it ain't broken, break it. And we have been disrupting in the industry. Many IITians have been in the forefront of those disruption. And however, we keep forgetting one thing, that how about, we are actually CEO of ourselves, our own career, right? So how about disruption? How about reinvention? How about recreating our own career? So we put together a panel on career transitioning. How do we rediscover ourselves? How do we recreate ourselves? And this is the panel with experts who actually advise the CEOs and CXOs of the world how to do that. And I am going to introduce the panel moderator. Indra Singhal is from IIT Kharagpur, and he has reinvented many times. I remember he was the MTS and at Bell Labs. It was like towards like 98, 2000 timeframe. And then he became the CFO of Lightbit and the CFO of Translucent Photonics. MTS CFO, and now he is the venture partner at Emergent Ventures. So he has gone through that. So now let me. Sorry. So Indra is going to now introduce the rest of the panel and enjoy the session.
Thank you, Ashish.
I'm going to go ahead and stand. So we're going to run this panel slightly differently in that we're going to establish the value that each of our panelists bring to the audience. And we'll try and keep a slightly longer period for the audience to ask questions, because I believe this is one where if you can come up with a question, I'm sure there are others here who have the same question. So let me start by sort of introducing each one at a time with a small preamble, and I'll then let them sort of introduce themselves, and from then we'll take it forward. Starting off with Prasad on the left. Prasad has worked as a physicist, product marketeer, research fellow in a computer company, startup CEO, a business school professor, and a CEO coach. He focuses on underlying beliefs, values, experiences that either enable or disable successful transitions and bringing out the genius within. And he has had Steve Jobs shout at him in 1984. Prasad, please introduce yourself.
Yeah. There are two questions that really bug me for a long time. One is this all there is to my job? Do other people really recognize my value? Should I go somewhere else? That is one of the things which triggered transition. The second one is, if there is more that I can do, what else do I need to learn? What else do I need to change so that I can take up the next job? These are two things that have triggered. That's how I moved from one field to another field to another. And I worked with a large number of companies in the past. I'm working small amount of consulting and some amount of teaching that I'm doing at this moment.
Moving on to Dilip. Dilip Saraf, now in his 5th career, in 5 different industries, has worked with over 6,000 clients globally during the past 18 years, and specializes in career reinvention. Dilip.
Thank you. I would say that my experience with thousands of clients I worked with is that most people let the career happen to them rather than getting in the driver's seat. So having done this 5 times now. This is my 5th career in very different fields. I left the corporate world when I was laid off as head of engineering when I was about 50 years old, almost 26 years ago. I decided that I'm not going to go back into engineering because my dream is to drop dead at my desk and not retire. And with that vision, I couldn't see myself getting back into engineering. So starting around that time, I started reinventing myself each time I saw an opportunity. So I have gone through 5 different careers. This is my 5th career now. And what I find, having done this myself, I've codified what it takes to reinvent yourself. And having worked with clients, what I find is that most people let the career happen to them rather than understanding that they can be in the driver's seat. And what they need is a shift in their mindset. And part of my practice is founded on shifting their mindset. So that's what I work on.
Moving on to Amitabh. Amitabh has moved from working at Schlumberger to managing tech startups, to working in private equity, to now being a partner at Egon Zehnder, one of the world's leading executive search firms and leadership advisory companies. He has firsthand experience in going through some pretty significant changes and transitions in his own career. He now advises and guides people through change and evolution in their professional journeys. Take it away.
So, not much to add to what Prasad and Dilip have said. My only point is that A, change is a constant, and B, it's always better when you initiate the change at a time when nobody expects it, least of all yourself. Waiting until you get to a place where you don't have a choice and you're compelled to make a change in what you do is not the right time to do it. The right time to do it is when there are very good reasons for you to stay in what you're doing. But you allow your curiosity and your passion to actually find a new way for yourself.
Thank you. And finally, we have Vikas. He thinks that life is a happy accident. Over a career of 20 years, he drifted a lot, doing lots of different things that were fun and rewarding. Then about 5 years ago, he took what he calls his most deliberate decision of his life, which is to embark on a second career as a coach and catalyst. He now supports leaders and teams to handle the complexities of modern work-life balance, bringing out their best.
So in keeping with the example you've set, let me also do this slightly differently. Let's do a show of hands. How many of you were born in the Bay Area? I see one hand. California, anyone? Of course, that Bay Area person, nobody else. How many of you are using what you studied in college directly and a lot in your job day to day? About 10% of the room. How many of you are doing a job that's very similar to your first job? You get the idea, right, where we're going with that. So we have all been going through a series of transitions, whether we call them that or not. And I just want to build on what everyone has already said, that we seem to make our career choices by default. And what hopefully we're going to do a little bit today in this conversation is to inspire and encourage and help all of you guys to take charge of that and do it on your terms from a position of strength. Or if it does happen that it gets done to you, then you can embrace it from a place of self-confidence and belief and knowing that you're going to be all right because you've always been all right.
Well, I think it's only fair that I introduce myself. I'm Indra Singhal. I'm now a partner at Emergent Ventures and a volunteer bean counter for this organization here that's put this conference together. You can imagine that I might have gone through quite a few transitions myself, being a mining engineer from IIT Kharagpur and doing what I'm doing now. I would like to highlight just a couple of those transitions, in spite of the fact that there are many. In 1996, 3 of us co-founders pooled together $500,000 to do our first startup. And it so happened that a few months in, I was the first person to ask the question, how much money do we have left? Because we were all writing checks. And as it goes in startups, the one who asks the question gets to answer it. And I have been answering that question ever since. The second transition I want to talk about was profoundly life-changing. Around 2000, my wife, Vinita, who's in the audience, who, with not one but 2 masters from Penn State and a computer science degree from IIT Kharagpur, decided to switch from hardware engineering to technical writing. For this, she went back to school and got certified. All this for a better quality of life for the family. My 2 daughters and I are blessed and grateful to be enjoying that better life she has dreamt for us. Thank you, Vinita. Enough about transitions. Let us now establish the resource that sits in front of you so that you can identify how you can best sort of exploit the resource that is sitting up there. So let me go ahead and start out by what I think might be some of the questions that you might have. So let me start out once again from the left, a question to Prasad. Many in the audience may relate to not being leveraged well in their current job. How should they reconcile their day-to-day grind of job and family to their passion, purpose, and meaning of life?
This is the common scenario. Most of us go to work and say, my managers don't leverage me, my company doesn't utilize me to my full potential, nobody pays attention to what I'm doing. But the key part is, nobody has any time or attention on you, but if you pay attention to what are the important projects that are going on that you are interested in engaging with, what are the kinds of things that other people are doing you would like to kind of volunteer your time. If you can begin to show interest in projects and resources and the trainings and other things, then instead of you being the victim of somebody else paying attention to you, you become recognized as a leader because you are raising questions, you are answering things that other people are not yet ready for, and you become noticed in the group. Instead of a person who is whining all the time, you are the person who is actually actively taking a role to do something about what you want to do. Most of the time, that seems to be very simple, but like I was talking to a software company person, and he was standing outside, and then when we were having lunch, because there were not enough lunch tables, so he came, sat at the same table, and then we were talking about. I said, what are you up to? He said, well, I got a particular task which my manager thought it need to be done in about 4 hours. I was able to get it done in 2.5 hours. So I said, congratulations, but then what did you do? He said, if I go back to my manager and tell them that I finished the task, I will get additional task. Why do I need to do more work than necessary? So I'm trying to figure out various other things, and I was able to catch up on my mail and other things like that. So when I go back in the afternoon, I'll get the new task. See, this is an example where you have a fantastic opportunity. If the manager thinks everybody needs about 4 hours or 3 hours or 3 days to get a task done, if you go back and show that you could get it done faster, or you got it done more smartly, or you are able to identify ways in which it can be done, you are right, you may get more work. But that also means you will be the number one for promotion, or you will be the one who has shown enthusiasm and energy to solve the problems instead of somebody else. I think that shift in the mindset that Dilip talked about, how do I create my own next job, will put you into a driver's seat and be recognized as a leader instead of you waiting for things to happen to you. That's one of the most important transitions that you may have to go through in your mind before your career transition will take up a steep path.
Dilip, having worked with thousands of clients, you have helped transition. What is the most common mistake you have seen people make in managing their careers?
I think the most common mistake is that people underestimate what they are capable of. And I think they surrender themselves to the environment that they see themselves in, and they're not able to see outside of that because of their mindset. And I can give you literally thousands of examples where client came to me and said, Dilip, I'm stuck in my career, I'm not going anywhere, what can I do, and so forth. It's because I always often give the metaphor of a jellyfish. Jellyfish is the only creature in the world that stays in one place and the food comes to it. And the currents take it wherever it goes, wherever the currents take it, and doesn't have its own ability to go. And disparagingly, and to provoke them, I call them, you are a jellyfish, in the sense that they let things happen to them and they think opportunities will come to them. What I found is the most common mistake is that there are plenty of opportunities in any organization. All you have to do is see the pain point because you're right next to it, and propose to your boss and say, boss, not that I want to be great coming out of this, but this will make you look good. And if you're able to sell that to your boss, the boss will say, how can I support you get there? And the second mistake that's almost endemic to Indians is they believe they will get what they deserve. Because our parents told us that. Don't make waves, your boss will give you what you deserve. Our parents were wrong. And the reason they were wrong is we get what we negotiate. So when you go to your boss and say, boss, I see this debugging problem taking twice as long, as Prasad was saying in his example, I can attack it and make the time third of what it is. And if I'm able to deliver that to you, look how good you will look to your boss. And if I deliver that, what's in it for me? That's how you proactively negotiate. Because if you wait till the end, when you make it a third or a quarter of the time, somebody has already hijacked your agenda. And they say, boss, look what I did. I deserve the promotion, and they get the promotion, and you wonder what happened. So that's the most common mistake I see. So part of my practice is making them see the shift they need to make to, rather than be a jellyfish, then be a shark.
Moving on to Amitabh. A possible questions from the audience may be, as I ponder changing careers, should I be trying to proactively shape the specific direction I wish to take in my career? Or is it just serendipity, fate, and destiny? I think Deepak touched on that quite a bit, but I think you might have a different perspective.
Yeah, it's a little bit like the nature versus nurture debate, right? When your child is growing up, you always wonder how much of what she has turned out to be is a result of the way she was born. Is it something that is innate to her? Or is it about my parenting? Is it about how I've shaped the child and the exposure that I've given to the child? So there's no right answer, and there's no single answer. And like most economists would agree, it's a little bit of it depends. But here's the interesting thing. When you look at the careers of successful people, and this is not just people that have made lots of money, but people that have done impactful things with their lives. almost always they chance upon an opportunity. They recognize, hey, hold on a second, this is something that I've been waiting for. This is the kind of opportunity that I can pour myself into. And then they go after it with a great amount of determination. So serendipity absolutely does play a role. Luck, chance, fate. What mood you were in when you sat down for your JEE exam actually had a pretty significant impact on how you performed and where you are today. So serendipity counts for a lot, but what successful people do is they build a framework for how they will recognize an opportunity when it presents itself. What are the things that are important to me? What do I want to be doing? What kind of environment do I want to be working in? What am I truly motivated by? Am I looking to actually create value? Am I looking to change the lives of others? What are my aspirations? Do I like to be in a place? Do I want to create a situation where there is a greater amount of affinity between the people that work together? Am I someone that's actually driven purely by solving difficult problems? So I'm going to look for difficult problems to solve. Is influence and power something that is a big driver for me? So should I be looking for that kind of opportunity? So you build a framework, and the framework will come down to simple things, even as where do I want to live? What kind of environment do I want to be in? Do I want to be working for a small company or a big company? And so most people tend to build that framework, whether consciously or unconsciously. And that framework becomes a very useful way to look at opportunities when these opportunities do come around. So my encouragement to everyone in the room would be, build that framework. That framework doesn't remain static through the course of your career, through the course of your life. It changes. Recognize when it's changing, but keep it ready at the back of your mind at all times, that when you see something, you can jump on it and say, this is what I'm going to do next.
Thank you. And Vikas, since most of us in the audience have an India background, how is navigating a transition different for us than most of those from other cultures?
Yeah. And, it was said earlier, Dilip said that, what our parents taught us, was wrong. And to Amitabh's point, there's things both ways. There are lots of factors at play. But one very important factor that is at play is our inner mindset. We think that a career, a job, a role is something that's external. It's out in the world. And when we are doing creative disruption, we're doing that creative disruption out there. When we're managing a career or transition, it's about that role, that business that's out there in the world. There is obviously truth to that. That's how it manifests. But the biggest game that we have to play is an inner game. The creative disruption that has to happen has to first and foremost happen inside of us. And the transition that has to happen alongside on the outside world, also inside of us. And that is where the mindset that we are a sum total of all the different influences that we've had. Our education. So many speakers kind of talked about their family influences. Umang, in the morning and during the keynote, he talked about, hey, I was a politician, and the setup in the family was business is bad, right? No one said perhaps that in so many words, but there are so many unsaid things said around the dining table and the lessons that our parents have taught us that live with us. And I would perhaps hazard a guess that a lot of you in this room were like me, where father was salaried and mom was a homemaker, basically middle-class family. And especially with India bootstrapping itself after independence, and financial safety and comfort was not something that was available to us. There was a risk aversion in our environment, and that is something that is in our bones, right? That sort of is something that we embody, that kind of risk aversion. And we don't realize that, and the thing that we have to confront is exactly that. And so, as we do this transition, especially, I think it's very important to look within ourselves. There are some ways in which we are completely unique people, so understanding that. In some ways, we are like some other people, like people who share our background and our heritage, and there are things that are part of our discourse and part of the way we were brought up that has both great strengths as well as tremendous limitations, and understanding those limitations and releasing those limitations. My dad worked at the same company his entire life. None of us are going to do that. I quit my first job after 10 and a half months. There was safety for them was really existential. That's not the case for us. Life has given us lots of opportunities. Just having that IIT stamp has opened doors for us and will continue to do so. So trusting that and knowing that I have a limited perspective is, that is the thing that we have to pay some attention to. It's not just about who can I network with, what jobs can I apply for. Don't just think about the external world, but also think about what's happening to you within. And especially as we kind of hit our midlife, for those of us who are 40 and beyond, that becomes really important because we can be experimenting by default in the first half of our career, but the second one should be very, very deliberate. Indra, can I call an audible given time? Instead of a second round of questions, do you want to just open it up to the audience?
Yeah, that's what we are going to do.
Perfect.
Yeah. So with that, I think what we'll do is I'm sure that we may have touched on some of the questions that you might have, but clearly just 4 questions wouldn't cover everything that the audience might have. So feel free, if you have a question, come on in. You can direct it either to any one of them or to all of them, and we'll have only one of them answer your question so we can take more of them.
Thanks. Great presentation. I'm Shail Kumar with Nalanda 2.0. In this whole conference, we heard a lot about creative disruptions, change in career, change is constant. You all reflect a lot of career transitions. What do you think colleges and universities can do better to prepare for this new world?
So who would like to take that question?
I can take a crack at it.
Go ahead.
So very quickly, our education system actually has to recognize that it was designed in the 19th century for the first part of the Industrial Revolution. It was designed to create worker bees or ants who could do repetitive tasks with efficiency, take orders. And now we're in a knowledge setup. Almost every person in an organization is actually as qualified education-wise as the CEO of the company is. The command and control structure just doesn't work. It's not fit for purpose for the kind of knowledge economy that we are in. So the education system has to recognize that. It has to encourage rule breaking. It has to encourage experimentation, rapid failure. In the manufacturing setup, mistakes were very expensive. But in the software and knowledge setup, that can be much more mitigated. So our education system should actually empower people, make mistakes, learn from them. All the stuff that is being taught to us sort of in the organizations or with books like Lean Startup or HBR articles like Rebel, Let Your Organization Rebel, all that has to become steeped in our education system. People have to really embrace that, recognizing that the education system that we created was for the 1800s, and in 2000s. It has evolved quite a bit, but not nearly enough.
Next.
Hi, I'm Richa. My question is actually about the work week. If you guys have thought about that, how much time shouldn't you spend at work? Because I personally am in contact with people who advocate for 4-hour work weeks versus spending every waking moment at work, right? So I think this is something I struggle with a lot, and probably other people here too, that how do you define a framework around doing job-related tasks versus doing exploring more things and looking at career transitions and other kind of stuff?
Prasad?
There are 2 things. One is the concept of work-life balance doesn't work like a balance in the first place. It doesn't happen from work hours, you do this, in the evening hours, you do that. That is probably a myth that doesn't carry over. I remember Marissa Mayer, when she became the CEO of Yahoo, right next to her office, she created a nursery where she was able to go take care of the baby, including the baby food that need to be processed while she's doing certain aspects of it. That was a pretty courageous act. Similarly, if you were to create certain kinds of effectiveness with which you can get the job done, when you talk about people who write the 4-hour work week or any of these, if you look at them, they are extraordinarily efficient and effective and productive in what they do. And they measure the metrics by which they look at their effectiveness is not based on how much work that I have put in, but how much output that I have generated, how much of impact I'm going to have. Especially for Indians, we need to think in terms of like karmanye vadikaraste mapaleshu kadachana. This has become so much. I will focus on the effort. I'm not measuring the output. If we can begin to look at what work have I taken, what job have I completed, what results have I produced, if you were to begin to look at that, and if you are known as a person who can deliver things when you promise in an intelligent way, in a way that it actually makes a difference, then work-life balance question goes away completely, because you can write your own ticket. You can say, you know what, I'm going to work from home, I'm going to work only so many hours, but actually it is not about time and money anymore. It is about, am I getting you what are the kind of results that you want? Actually, the most of the work in the world, as it is moving towards the effectiveness and the services, I think that's where it's going. So if we can reframe ourselves in terms of, when am I most productive? Am I a person who works very effectively in the morning or afternoon? How do I manage my own disruptive things, like how many messages, how many emails, how do I manage my phone calls? If I can think about it and organize myself to become very effective in producing outcomes and measurable outcomes, and as some of the other panelists have mentioned, and if you can make sure those outcomes are recognized by other people as your contributions, then that relationship will change. So you may need to focus on changing the dynamics between you and your manager, you and your organization, so that you are known as a person who is extraordinary. Then you can write your own ticket.
I would like to add to that, if you don't mind. I think this book, which has really taken off 4-Hour Work Week, has created a lot of misapprehension. And what the book's message really is not that your work week should be 4 hours, but the value-added work that you do at work can be done in 4 hours. And I'll give you my own example. 18 years ago, when I started my career coaching practice, a lot of peers, coaches told me that, Dilip, if you had 60 or 70 clients, that's a full client load. I don't think you can service any more than that. Today, my active client load is 784. And I service all of them. Nobody has complained that, Dilip, you don't return my calls or anything like that. Now, how was I able to do that? By using some of the principles that are not jumping out from that book, which is delegate, automate, streamline, and eliminate. If you do that, I let my clients own a lot of their work, and I do the work that only I can do. Does two things. It gives them value because they say, Dilip, I'm paying a lot of money, but I'm learning a lot because you are watching what I do. And secondly, they own it. And that's how I'm able to have 7, and I can take a lot more. So I'm not bragging about my workload, exactly the point that Prasad made. All of us look at work in the wrong way. As this morning said, MuleSoft, we look at ourselves as mules. We carry that load, but we don't look at the value-added work that we do and separate it out and put the rest of it in those 4 categories, and you'll be amazed how much you can do.
Okay, my question's for Amitabh. So you work for a company called Egon Zehnder, I believe, and these kind of companies do a lot of matchmaking for C-level jobs. So my question is, what role do companies like yours play in enhancing the aspiration of individuals who, by themselves didn't think that they were capable of C-level jobs?
Yeah, good question. I guess, I'm thinking back to the 17 years that I spent in industry prior to coming into what I do now. And one of the things that I found was hugely helpful for me is just the ability to have someone that had a breadth of exposure to a very wide set of opportunities in the market, an understanding of a number of industries, an understanding of a number of roles, who could objectively advise me and guide me when I had questions about my own career. So I guess the first thing that comes to mind is, unless you have an innate curiosity in yourself about, what else could I be doing, and unless you're prepared to ask that question, no firm, whether it's in Egon Zehnder or anybody else, can actually help you. You need to come to the table, start with the understanding that, yes, I want to question what I'm doing now. I want to think about what else I could be doing. But I think the value of an advisor often is to hold a mirror up, to be able to say, okay, look, this is what the world sees of you. And here is some thinking around what more you could be doing in as objective a way as possible. Now, in some situations, it may actually cater to the aspirations of the individual. In others, it may actually be a realization that, hold on a second, I'm actually not ready for what I want to do. I need to recalibrate my ambition. So I don't know if that helps, but objectivity really is the end of it.
So I had hi, my name is Rachna, and my question is, I guess, for everyone. I wanted to ask that, supposing I've been doing a particular, I've been in a particular field for a very long time, and then I want to move out or move to a broader area, and I try to do that, and I do the studies, and maybe go back to school or something, but every time I go and apply for something like that, it just comes back to me that you don't have the correct experience, or you don't have the experience that we're looking for in this particular role. So how do I make that jump or that transition?
May I answer that? In my first book, I wrote an entire section called, "If you want to beat Tiger Woods, don't play golf with him." If you play ping pong and beat him, you can say, "I beat Tiger Woods." Right? So the point I want to make is, most of the people who feel like they have tanked in their particular area of work try to get certification in some other area or do what you just were saying that people typically do, which is true. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that. But what I'm saying is you need to learn to find how to beat Tiger Woods without inviting to play golf. And I'll tell you my own story. When I lost my first job, when I was about 50 years old, AIDS was really big at the time. This is 1989, 88, 89. And nobody had an instrument to detect the progression of AIDS. Now, I am from high tech. This was all in biotech. There's a company called Becton Dickinson. In fact, Ravi Matre, who spoke this morning, his father was the president of Becton Dickinson. And he gave a talk that said that we are the first ones to come up with an AIDS instrument desktop, and it will be out in 6 years. 6 years is a very long time. I was in the audience, and after he finished his talk, I walked out with him and said, "Nagesh, why does it take 6 years to develop something that we typically do in half the time?" And he said, "How do you do that?" And well, his objection was, there is FDA, there are clinical trials, there is this first time, 10 objections he gave me. And I really didn't know what I could do for him, but I just challenged him. I said, "What if I showed you how to do this in 3 years?" And he said, "Can you come to my executive team tomorrow and show us how you would do that?" So I spent all night studying about that and made a 1-hour presentation, and he said, "You are on." And we got it out in 3 years. At that time, I had no clue we could get it out in 3 years. We did a lot of things concurrently that biotech industry at the time didn't know. This is 1989. So the point I want to make is the challenge that you need to throw to the person who can listen to what you have to bring as a value statement and focus on that rather than take these courses ad nauseum, because you'll never catch up with it. Yeah. Always find a place where Tiger Woods can play the game as well as golf and beat him to it. That's my mantra.
Could I just add briefly to that?
Sure.
Conventional wisdom actually has us believe that you can't teach an old dog new tricks. You reach a certain age and stage in your career, and that's it. You're the sum of your experiences, and that's all you're relevant for going forward. But I think that is very rapidly being disproven, right? Studies of the human brain, for example, demonstrate that the plasticity of the brain, its ability to actually adapt to new environments, to learn new functions, is something that continues over the course of the lifetime of an individual. So you don't stop learning until you die. So if people tell you that you can't learn new things, absolutely challenge them. But I think if you want to appeal to, or if you want to demonstrate the right markers to someone that you're going to and saying, look, this is something I want to do even though it's not something I've done before, I think there are really two things that you can think about. One, passion, right? So demonstrate a certain amount of passion, energy, conviction, commitment around the path that you want to take. And the second is think about the potential that you demonstrate. And potential really is something that is going to be an indicator of, or the probability of, your success in the future in that new role. Now, irrespective of a person's career, irrespective of a person's profession, potential really can be measured broadly in 4 attributes. So the first is determination, right? So how determined are you to get to a certain outcome, and how do you self-regulate in challenging situations to achieve an outcome? So, think about how you're going to demonstrate that to someone when you're saying, I can get into this and I can do it. The second is insight, the ability to connect the dots, the ability to say, I can draw insight from a certain situation and bring some intelligence to the table in how we solve a problem. The third is engagement, right? This is how I'm going to appeal not just to the minds of people that I work with, but also to the hearts of people that I work with. It often shows up as passion, it shows up as a desire to work with people. And the fourth is curiosity at a very personal level. Being able to show that you are open to learning, you want to learn, to change, to adapt yourself. And if you look at people that are high potential people that have grown on to do big things in their careers, they will show these 4 markers in pretty strong measures. So, if you're able to show passion and potential to the people that you're speaking with, and you're thinking thoughtfully about how do I get these markers across to people, it may change the way in which people perceive you.
We'll take just one last question. We are actually over time. But what I would like to encourage every one of you is, now that you know what each of the panelists sort of focus on and where their strengths lie, if you have burning questions, find them after the panel has disbanded and, jump on them. They're here to help. If anything else, just pick up a card and follow up with them. So do that, and let's very quickly, with just 1 more minute, ask the question. And
So Ravi from Chennai. Samita, kind of following up on your question on perception management. When you are kind of a rolling stone is how some people look at you, going from career A to career B. How do you manage that perception beyond your answer, and even getting the foot in the door to say, hey, I've done career A so far, and now I want to do B. So how do you get that credibility for somebody to give you a chance?
May I answer? Sorry.
Vikas, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, what I was going to say is that the world in which we are headed is going to be a multifunctional, multidisciplinary world. And so the 2 things are changing. One, right, earlier the model was learn here and apply here. Like study in school and then apply, or go to a training class, learn something new and apply on the job. No longer true. Secondly, all the cutting edge stuff is happening at the intersection of a lot of different disciplines, right? So you can look at what is an adjacency. If someone has a view that if they're in the old school, right, and you're in the new school, it's never going to work. So you also have to look at your audience. If you're in the new school, then find people who already think like that. Add an aspect to your role. It doesn't have to be a complete 100 to 0 on one and 0 to 100 on the other. How can you add aspects to your role? So I was doing marketing analytics, but I was interested in the people field. So I got involved in the engagement survey and what the organization was doing behind that. Built a relationship with the head of HR. Did that for some time, and then she went to a different organization in HR. In the meantime, I had made a transition to coaching, and she invited me to join and sit on her leadership team. So these 100 to 0 binary transitions probably are not practical. And so you have to be strategic. You have to have really the interest and passion and build addendums, to your core skills. And then gradually a transition will definitely, work out. And it's like really, we are headed in a multidisciplinary world. So remember that and keep sort of adding to your skills, add value to the job that you're doing with that new perspective, and then you can ramp up that percentage over time.
With that, I'd like to conclude this session. Please give a, warm applause to the panel. And once again, thank you all, and make sure that you hit each of